All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Moore. I'm a solution engineer with Esri and out of my home office in Olympia, Washington. And Chris Marsh is also with me. He's another solution engineer. We both work with basically state government agencies. Chris is fairly recent from an Esri perspective. I think you've been here for, what, a year and a half, 2
Yep,
years?
year and a half.
And came from Department of Fish and Wildlife. And this presentation and demonstration, we're going to focus on apps for the field. Mainly, I know Wilma asked us to talk about, ArcGIS field maps, and definitely we'll be covering that in a decent amount. And we're also going to cover a couple of other applications and talk about some things that we see in terms of, how people are using these applications and other interesting technologies that can play into some of the field work. So anyway, we do, if you have questions along the way, please, we'll have some time to, answer them. Just post them into the chat, and we can dive into those questions as we go along. So let's try to make it, we got a lot of people in here, so let's try to, good Q&A is always great, and want you to be able to get your questions answered. So anyway, welcome. Okay. So in this session, we're going to discuss field operations and how we use these technologies to modernize some of our field operations, and we can talk about specifically a few applications, including the ArcGIS Field Maps application. If you've heard of Collector for ArcGIS, that has been basically brought into this application called Field Maps. We'll talk a bit more what that means. But if you're familiar with Collector, that's the most synonymous would be the ArcGIS Field Maps application. We'll talk a bit about ArcGIS Survey 123 and another application you may or may not have heard of called ArcGIS Quick Capture. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with some resources and, of course, we'll have some time for Q&A throughout. All right, so let's start by talking about field operations in the context of ArcGIS. Today our organizations are capturing data to support their missions. Sometimes this is a paper-based process. Sometimes you're in some level of automation. A lot of people go out in the field, do work, bring it back to the office, and then have to re-enter data. Maybe they put it in field books. And what we've seen a lot of people doing over the last few years, especially with smartphones, people are using these smartphones within the workplace and modernizing to be able to maybe eliminate some of that back office work. And really that's the goal here, is that spend more time in the field doing the work that you need to do and having a good back end process that keeps you from having to re-enter data or give it to somebody else to enter, and take these pen and paper workflows into this more streamlined digital workflow. And we also might have other older legacy data capture platforms as well. So it might be old Windows mobile applications, things like that, like ArcPad, and modernizing off of those applications into these smartphone or tablet device type of operations. In either case, modernization provides a lot of benefits, right? Obviously, it allows for efficient and accurate data capture, reducing our time. Some people might say, well, to reduce our time spent in the field. Well, actually, it might give us more time in the field and less time in the back office doing work. Giving us being cost effective. We're not duplicating efforts. Of writing stuff down and re-entering it, or making multiple trips into the field, or reducing the number of trips that we have to take because we can spend more time in the field. And, we can streamline some of the data management processes, if we do a good job authoring our application, or maybe it's a Survey 123 form, we have really good validation so that we spend more time. We don't have to spend that time in the back office cleaning up data. And then, of course, being able to monitor status of our field workers, maybe it's just, we've got a number of people going out and doing some of this data capture. We can kind of see how much we're getting done, and keeping track of, hey, we got to get, we've got so much stuff we got to accomplish in field season. We know how much that is, and we can track that stuff with like a dashboard or something like that, and share those dashboards with managers or other people who are interested in see how we're tracking that progress. So ArcGIS is at the core that kind of glues all these data collection solutions together. We want to make sure that both our field and office workers are using the same authoritative data. That this is going to allow us to reduce our errors, boost our productivity, and hopefully save some money, or at a minimum, get more out of our field season. Visit more things. Capture more data when we've got that time to be out in the field. And we typically like to describe our field work in a number of phases. We get this whole idea of planning and, sorry about that, planning our work. We might do that with like our desktop GIS to figure out, hey, we've got all of this work that we've got to get accomplished, and we need to figure out who's going to, how many people we're going to be doing that work. We can use that in do some dispatching of people, and we have an application called Workforce that allows for that. Then once we do an assignment within Workforce, we can have our users navigate. Maybe they need turn-by-turn directions to get where they're going to work, and they can navigate in vehicle turn-by-turn to where they need to perform that data collection activity. The other thing that's interesting, especially from a state perspective within the notion of this navigate tool, is that we allow, they work disconnected for one, so you can actually navigate to a location whether you have internet connectivity or not. And I know a lot of agencies, are doing work in, remote areas where they might have Forest Service road or other agency managed access roads, and you can load custom roads into Navigator. So if you had service roads or things like that aren't typically things that you would route to like in Google Maps and stuff like that, you can load those custom roads in conjunction with the commercial data so that you can route to these as well. So I know not a lot of folks out in Idaho that I'm working with have used Navigator, but if it's something that you're interested in, we can talk about that at some other point. We have other folks that are just trying to go out in the field and they want to take the data that they have back in the in the main office, and we've had an application called Explorer that allows you to kind of in a read-only mode, not do data collection, but just take data out there so that you have an offline map with all your assets and things like that, so that you can see the the other data that you might be working with while you're out in the field. And then there's the main thing that we're talking about today, which is really that data capture piece. And it could be very geocentric, meaning, the traditional collector workflow where you're capturing data on a map. Or we could use something like Survey 123, which is more form-based data collection, which might have an attribute of some sort of location, so form first. And then we have another application called Quick Capture, which is really a fast data collection utility. Really think of it like a windshield survey, or you're up in an helicopter counting animals or something like that. You don't need a really detailed form to fill out. You want to basically tap a button on the screen really quickly and capture a location and some attribute about that. And we'll show an example of that in a bit. And then of course we might want to keep track of people who are out in the field, and that's a utility called Tracker that they can turn on that kind of keeps track of like a breadcrumb trail of where they are, and you can kind of see that back in the office if that's something that you're interested. A lot of people doing worker safety related stuff want to use that. Obviously, when you don't have internet, what it does is it logs that data on the device. When it has connectivity, it will synchronize that back. So it depends on what your need is, but that tracking piece can be used in there. And then, so really all of these things can work together as well. So, we can tie workforce to survey 123 and tracker and collector and all, the field maps application, and we can use these apps in conjunction with each other, and we'll talk about that a bit today as well. So the ArcGIS Field Maps application is meant to take those technologies that were once individual apps, like ArcGIS Explorer, which was our read-only, take your data out in the field application, with the very map-centric data collection application of Collector, and the battery optimized and secure tracking capabilities of the ArcGIS Tracker, the workforce tasking and coordination application, and the Navigate, the turn-by-turn directions of Navigator, and combine them into one application. Now, where we are today is that we've got these three pieces, have been merged: the Explorer application, the Collector application, and the Tracker application. All of those capabilities have merged into this one application called ArcGIS Field Maps. So like I said, if you're using Collector, one of the things that you can actually do right now is you can download field maps. Any of the Collector maps that you had been using will open right up just fine in field maps, and the experience is going to be fairly similar. I mean, the user experience and all that stuff hasn't really changed a whole lot there, but we do have these other capabilities that can be leveraged if you sign in with somebody who's just, doesn't need to do data collection, is just a viewer. They can actually open up the Explorer map and view, these maps kind of read-only. All right.
Hey, Scott, real quick.
Yeah.
John, can you, I think you have the control of Zoom. Can you turn the doorbell off when people enter? And
yes, Wilma, is that something that you can do? No, okay. Yeah, this kind of well, when I transition over to Chris, I'll take a look and see if I can get that turned off. He's going to do a demonstration here in a few minutes, and I'll try that then instead of looking for it now. So I'm talking a little bit about field maps, but there's also the idea of Survey 123 and Quick Capture. Let's see what's going on here. And one of the questions that we often get, as solution engineers is, well, which application, should I choose? Field maps or Quick Capture? And really, the beauty is, if you have access to one, you pretty much have access to all three of them. There's not like, it's not usually something else that you have to purchase. So I look at it like, okay, I need to understand what these three apps do well and how they do it, and then knowing what they can do, pick the right tool for the job, right? And so, the simplest way that I think about this is Survey 123 should be used for very form-centric workflows. So a lot of people come and they have an existing form that they fill out while they're going out into the field. And those forms can often be digitized easily into a Survey 123 application. So that's at a high level, that's one simple way to think about it. The Field Maps apps, it's like if you're used to like going out in the field and doing your data collection through a map, because you're quickly capturing points, lines, areas on a map, and it's very map centric, then think about using the Field Maps application. And if you are needing something that is very simple and fast to use, that because you're capturing a lot of features quickly and even simultaneously, you might want to take a look at Quick Capture. And what I mean by that is, you could be riding as a passenger in a vehicle down a road and be noticing things. Maybe it's a pothole, maybe it's some other roadside asset or something like that that you want to mark, and all you want to do is tap on a button really quickly, and it automatically grabs that GPS location and maybe some sort of attribute associated with it, like, oh, this is a pothole or a road crack or some sort of thing that could be captured while you're moving fast. And you could also be capturing linear features while, like maybe I'm capturing a guardrail, I start a guardrail, and then I'm capturing a pothole while I'm still capturing that guardrail, and then I up the guardrail collection. All that stuff can be done. It's really what we call a big button app. You tap simply on the screen to do some stuff, but it's not going to be like a detailed form like Survey 123, or you're tapping on a map to collect points like in the Field Maps application. So really, the best thing to do is to understand how these applications work and determine for your particular workflow what might be the best fit for your particular workflow. And for one app, it might be, for one workflow, it might be one app, and another, it might be something different. So I would say definitely don't try to make everything be make one app be the one that does everything. Be disappointed, I think. So let's talk about the map-centric ArcGIS Field Maps application first, and let's dive into it here. So, a lot of people have asked for enhancements and improvements on some of our existing solutions. Here's some of the key benefits that we offer with the field maps that meet those applications. So why we basically created the field maps instead of keeping these apps all separate. So the first one was people wanted a single app to deploy and learn. They didn't want to have to do something slightly different for Explorer, something different for Tracker, and that sort of thing. And then they also wanted a single sign-on experience to start, their data capture quickly, so they don't need to sign into multiple applications. Another piece was having a small footprint on the mobile devices, meaning if I deployed something like, for example, an offline or like a base map package, something like that for Explorer, I would have to deploy that as well for Collector. And that's because it's all in one. We only have to deploy that one time, and some of those files can get really big. And we know we have a certain amount of space on our devices, and it's not necessarily, we don't want to fill that up if we don't have to. And then consistency with how our projects are deployed on the devices. So we were doing deploying applications a certain way, maps a certain way for Explorer. It was slightly different for Collector. Getting those things to kind of be, have the same process was really important for us as well as our users. And I mentioned this, but the reduction of duplication as well. So not just the apps themselves, but having a smaller footprint because we're not installing multiple apps. But really, I think the smaller footprint is really about the data duplication. There's no need to load these offline areas for both of those applications. So Field Maps really has 5 key capabilities in this one application. And that's, the whole idea of map viewing. So being able to view and explore our read-only maps for one. Being able to sketch and mark up and share drawings within that application as well. We want to do the data collection piece. So we want to capture our data in kind of the same way that we were used to doing it within the collector interface. And we want to be able to leverage things like related tables to do our work as well. So, a very common workflow is having some sort of, asset that we might visit every year and do some sort of inspection on. And then we also wanted to be able to do location tracking and being able to track where our workers are if they opt in with some real-time tracking. So let's dive a little bit into each of these capabilities. So the Field Maps application is built with our ArcGIS Runtime SDK. So we have these runtime developer kits, so for developers to actually build their own applications as well. So if your agency wanted to develop their own iOS application or Android application, they would be using the same runtime developer kit that we use to build the Field Maps application. And it has a lot of great advanced map viewing capabilities right within that SDK. And so we get things like advanced symbology and rendering that you see when you're authoring maps in ArcGIS Online or in ArcGIS Pro, and being able to even use things like arcade expressions within this environment. And we want to be able to do things like support group layers and annotations within this environment as well, and things like our pop-ups, which also include arcade expressions. And if you're not familiar with arcade, that's fine. We could have a whole another session on that. But basically, it really adds interactivity and some scripting within things like symbology or your pop-ups, so that you can query another data set and put that information on the pop-up when you tap on something. So it's just a great way that technology that we can use to add a lot more pop to these applications. And then doing things like layer refreshes and auto updates within this environment. We support those sorts of things as well. Tools within our apps. I mean, at this point in time, everybody expects that we can have any number of base maps on there. There's the base maps that are available when you're connected online, and then there's base maps that could be only loaded on your device. I know that a lot of people go out in the field and they're in places where they don't have connectivity, and they need offline base maps as well. And so being able to swap between one that you have loaded on your device as well as the ones that we host in ArcGIS Online or that you may host in your portal are all available within the Field Maps application. Simple things like bookmarks. I want to create a web map and have a set of bookmarks in there so that people can easily, or my field folks can easily jump to those locations using those bookmarks. That's just a simple map viewing capability in the application. Of course, people want to see things like legends, and being able to do stuff like use a measure tool within the application. I want to measure a distance, or I want to measure an area. We can do that as well. And then being able to share your map, maybe that you're working with other users. You can airdrop it to them. You can save it on your device. You can even save it to send it via email to somebody that you're working with as well. And then other tools that we would expect, things like searching for features within your map or performing a synchronization. If you've done some data entry and you want to synchronize that back to ArcGIS Online or your portal, you can do that. And being able to get driving directions, either using Navigator or even using other applications like Google Maps, things like that, or Apple Maps on the device. And then having a compass built in too. So if you're navigating over the ground, being able to, kind of use the application as a compass. So in terms of map markup capability, this is really handy. And Chris will show some markup. It's a really nice drawing environment. You just can kind of, if you draw a line and it happens to close like we see on this map, it goes, oh, that's actually an area. It's not really a line that you're drawing. If you just tap on the map, it creates it as a point. So it's really a nice freehand sketching tool, and you can move them around. You can share them. You can make your lines. You can turn them into arrows to kind of highlight things. And you can save that markup in one or multiple layers in your application. And that markup is actually available across all your maps. So if you do some markup in field maps and you want to kind of, have that available in another map, you can just turn that markup layer on. And then, of course, a lot of times what people want to do is they want to share that markup. Maybe they want to share a screenshot of it to somebody to say, hey, you need to go, check this out and do an inspection, or I want to actually share that data back to my organization and let somebody else maybe open that markup in ArcGIS Pro, for example, and they can do that as well. The other thing that a lot of folks have been doing with the Field Maps application is using it in conjunction with highly accurate GPSs. And so we, have supported within Collector GNSS devices, and there's quite a few out there that people pair with their iPhone or iPad, Android devices to get more accuracy than what's built into the device. And so we have a number of ways that we do that. But why do we need that? Maybe we need better GPS activity. I've got somebody chatting here. Okay. And you can get down to centimeter level accuracy for projects even with this environment. So here's some of the partners that we work with, in terms of devices. Obviously the big ones out there like Trimble and EOS and Bad Elf, and there's lots out there to increase that precision of the GPS on there as well. And then of course, people do things like mount them on poles or put them in backpack, and people are 3D printing attachments to mount your iPhone to the pole mount, or there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on out there for that. But just know that the main thing that I want you to understand is that if you have highly accurate GPS needs, we can leverage those receivers with these with the ArcGIS Field Maps application. You can do things like GPS averaging, streaming. You can do it based off of time and distance. And then of course people want to know, like, well, how accurate are we? So when I'm using Collector with a highly accurate GPS, it'll tell me, oh yeah, you're at 2 centimeter accuracy, which is actually really interesting to be able to see and know that when you're collecting, you can set these thresholds as well. Say, hey, if I don't want anything less accurate than 30 centimeters, it can not let you collect with those settings in place. And then you basically can have multiple devices that you might be working with, and you can set up multiple providers, and they might all have different location profiles associated with them. One of the big benefits in going to the new field maps is the Smart Firms capability. This is something that we didn't have in Collector. It allows us to do things like have conditional visibility, and that condition can be based on a script or other value of a previous selection. Having things like pick list and required fields. Some of those things were available in Collector, but there are some new capabilities in the Smart Firms, and Chris is going to show those as well. And then the location tracking has really been, it's a great technology. It is really meant to not drain your battery, because obviously we all know that if you're using your phone, you're connected to mapping and that sort of stuff that's leveraging the GPS, it tends to drive battery usage through the roof. And so they're definitely trying to do that as least amount of impact on the battery as possible. And you might want to be able to your users might want to be able to turn the tracking on and off, and then you can also of course see your tracks on the device, and you can so you can see where you've been, all that sort of stuff. And I haven't done this yet because I don't have an Apple Watch, but it works in conjunction with the turning on the tracking on and off with your Apple Watch as well. I just need to get Esri to buy me an Apple Watch and I'll be all set. All right. So we kind of talked about this. We're going to kind of jump into a demo. The 5 key capabilities being, map viewing, map markup, the data collection piece, supporting related tables, having location tracking. That's what we're looking at with the Field Maps application. But the one thing a big change between Collector and Field Maps is now we have this this full-featured web authoring tool. So instead of just authoring a map within the map viewer, there is a companion application for authoring your field maps in the web browser in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And it's integrated right into the app launcher. You can see there's the Field Maps app there when you're logged into ArcGIS Online. And really, it's to centralize that experience for deploying the maps and make it very targeted, and have it be basically kind of a one-stop shop for authoring your maps and configuring the various capabilities like your smart forms, your offline areas, those sorts of things. And then in there you can choose who you're going to share that to and how to deploy that out to the devices. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Chris to demonstrate field maps, both the application as well as the web application. Stop sharing.
Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, let's see if we can get this all working like it's supposed to. Can we see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. So one of the first things I wanted to mention, and I don't know, I think we might have mentioned it just a little bit, but briefly in the slides there, but part of with field maps, a lot of the functionality that comes into it is sort of depends on like what your user type is. So if you're familiar with ArcGIS Online and user types, you can be a viewer or you can be a creator, and then we have some field worker roles that sort of choose some things. But then we also have some license types, and one of those, like to get the tracker functionality, you have to have the tracker license, and then that will show up. At least right now, that's how it shows up in the application. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through the web portion, and then we'll get into configuring a map, and then we'll look at the actual mobile app as we go. So you can start with a web map, and you can throw some data in, and you can see here I've got some. This is just some data, and it's some assets that I want to go collect information on, right? So they're all color-coded and those kind of fun things. And when I go to the app launcher, I can find it here like Scott showed, field maps. And I'm presented with, this sort of view. And if I've got a lot of maps like I do, I can, search, look for maps that I want to work on. You can make copies of them. You can look at your sharing and everything right here, or I can go in and, configure it. So right away you're presented sort of with this view, this overview. And if you wanted to, like there may be certain maps that you just don't want people to have access to in the field app maps mobile. So you can actually hide them to say like, I just don't want this one to be available to them. So you can hide that if you want. It's going to tell you if the map that you have is offline enabled. So is the content that's in the map ready for offline use? And if it's not, it's going to have a red X there. As we sort of, look through these, we can see there's this content table of contents, which opens up, the information that's, in the map itself. So in this case, there's only one layer, but it shows you editable layers, and it shows you which base map that I'm using. And if I click on my editable layers, you can see that it's got the same colors, as far as my templates go. And one of the things that's really nice here is that with my data, I may want to, have more templates that sort of, help me collect data in the field faster. So an example would be all of these things that I'm collecting here have different project phases. And so what's nice is I can come in here, I can duplicate this. And on the first one, I can go into my default values, and I know it's a benchmark, but I can say, you know what, this might be an install phase. And, it might be, maybe it's a new benchmark or something like that. And so I can set some of that information. If I want to, I can change what that is. So this could be, new benchmark. I'll just change this to a new benchmark. And then and I can put some information like this is an install phase. You can say it's an install. And then on the other one, I could say this one might be a removal. And I can go in and again change this to, you know, renewable. And so I'm able to come in here and sort of, you know, set up what my templates are going to be, and then I can save those. And now when it opens up in Field Maps, oh, wait, I'm unable to save it. That's awesome. And then the other piece of it is the form. And so I can take and convert my pop-up into a form. And if I wanted to, I can group certain things together. So I can grab one of these over here and just drag and drop it. I can create a group. And this might be a group that is the, you know, maybe it's the site information. So I just put a site information group. And then I can drag the things that belong in there. Let's see. And I got site location, and I can put, you know, additional site info in there. And then maybe I want to move project phase above it. And so this is one of the things that's nice compared to, you know, before with Collector, you were kind of like stuck with the order in which the fields were like in your data when you had feature layers that were editable. And so here I can come in and, you know, move the fields around. I can group things together. Like Scott mentioned, there's certain things that I could set up. So maybe, you know, if I wanted to say, oops, not this one, sorry. Let's cancel here. I want this question to come up when, you know, something is something else, right? So I could say, hey, I want when the, let's see, the project phase, let's do that one. So let's do phase is equal to, it's equal to, oops. It is, no, that's not right. I'll do an arcade on the fly. There it is. Okay, perfect. And so now this will show up if this is install. This is the only time this question will show up. And I can save that. And when that's all good to go, again, I've got my offline piece. If I wanted to, I could go create an offline area. So I could, you know, here I am in Olympia, and I could create an area and say, you know, let's make something like this. And it'll build a tile package for me. You know, this would be my, you know, demo map. And when that's all done, it'll generate this area and create, you know, the map for me so I can go grab it offline. So while that's doing that, let's see if we can bring this over.
Hey, Chris, there was a question that came in from Wilma. So
Okay.
are the drop-down lists based on lists and domains up in the data, or what?
For which piece? Like this?
Like drop-down lists, yeah.
Yes, yep. So there'd be domains that you'd have set up in the data. So this project phase would have a drop-down because there's a domain for this particular one. So if I was to go look at the data. Hope that answers your question. One of the other things that's nice is you can do required fields. That was something you couldn't do before. So this is, you know, building an offline map as we go. And then, you know, again, I can do the sharing here. This one's already set with everyone, but if I needed to, I could set that sharing up. I can control like how attachments get sent, those other types of, you know, so I can say if it's editable, get the attachments, or never get the attachments, but just get the features. So you can sort of control, you know, what's being downloaded to the device.
Right, and think about that because you may have you may have features that have many attachments, and that can get really big if you, so say you've done a bunch of work, you've taken a lot of photos associated with many points, and imagine each photo is at least a megabyte. So if you had, thousands of photos, and you want to take that stuff offline or have the users your mobile users download that stuff. You definitely, you want those options to be able to say, well, maybe I don't want all the attachments because it's going to be, make the synchronization processes slower and all that sort of stuff. So definitely think about that.
So this is already created, so it's done packaging that whole thing up. So one of the things I'm going to show you here, this is the field application on my mobile device. And you can see because I have the navigator license, I have this option for doing the tracking, so I could turn that on if I wanted to. And
that's the tracker license.
This is the tracker license. Yep. Yeah. Because I have that license enabled, like it shows up, and then I can say how long do I want to track me. And so I can say, hey, I do it until I turn it off, or some duration. So I can say for 4 hours. So now it's telling me, hey, I'm going to track you till 5:43 p.m. The other thing is I've got, different types of maps. So in sort of that Explorer functionality, this is a mobile map package that was generated using ArcGIS Pro. I'm able to download that, and it's an application or a map application that I can interact with all of the data. That's what's really nice with the mobile map package, where it's completely offline. I'm able to interact with the data, and this is way harder to do with the mouse, so I'm just going to finger here. And, I can zoom into these areas. One of the things I would like to show is the markup. So if I want to do markup, like Scott mentioned, I can, draw around, and then I can say, you know what, I want that to actually be a circle, or not a circle, but a polygon, and I can just change that if I need to. And then I get these options of like, hey, this was a line. Can I turn that into an arrow? And it'll do those things, for me. Or I can, get rid of them. I can go in and label them if I want, delete them. Let me just do the, if I just tap, I should just get a dot. Okay, we'll just do that again. So it made a line, but it's like, I think this might be a polygon. I can fill that. And then when I'm done, if I want to share it, I can share it to ArcGIS Online, or just a screenshot, or to other things like, messaging and things like that. So if I went to ArcGIS Online, it would say, well, where do you want it to go? And I could put that in a specific group if I wanted to, or with the public, or I could share it with my org. And then what it's going to do is it's going to make a copy of that, make it a feature set, and send it up into ArcGIS Online. We'll be able to go find that in just a minute. One of the things that's really nice about these mobile map packages is that you can also build location pieces into it. So in this case, I've got game management units built into it. So I can type in a game management unit for Washington, and then it'll go find that for me. And then it, shows me where it's at, and I can say, hey, give me directions to that, and it automatically, pulls up Google Maps and says, hey, here you go. This is how you get to wherever you want to go. So, there's some nice pieces to that. And an option, if Navigator was installed on here, then I'd be able to use that as well. So there's some nice things about those mobile map packages. Now, if I want to go to the map that I made, I can go to my tide gauge map. And in this case, like, you can see that I now have these different options that I made. So my new benchmark that's an install, or my benchmark that's a removal. I can click on one of those, and you can see it's already filled out. You can see my grouping. So if I wanted to, I could take a photo, and I've got my wonderful desk here, and as I go through those things, I can attach those. I can put comments and stuff in there. I don't believe this is the one I had the rule for, or was it? It was not. And once I'm done, it's going to submit that. It's going to send that information up. I think on the other one I had was the removal, and I think if I change that to an install, the what project 4 came in, I think it goes back to removal. That question's gone. So you can see removal, there is no what's it for, but if I do install, the what project is for shows up. So, that's just some of the logic that we've built in there. So you can see, how that's working. And again, I can submit that. Let's see, is there anything else? I think as far as the app goes, I think we're okay. One of the things I did want to show is that if you have a map that has a lot of stuff, so in this case, I've got a data set or a map that has lots of data in it. So the first example I showed only had one, but this one has 3 different editable layers, and so we're able to, look at these. But then I also have lots of reference layers, and so you can see it's just sort of showing what those are. But what's really nice is that when I look at my content and look at my offline, it's going to tell me like, hey, is there any data that doesn't work offline? And I might not be able to take a specific data set with me. So it helps me understand like what's offline ready and what's not offline ready, which ones from my editable is there. And so there's just different ways to sort of, manage that content in here. So you can have offline data that's editable and have offline data that's also, like I said, a reference layer. Scott, was there anything else?
Well, we did have a couple questions come in.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the first one from Kara. Oh no, there's a bunch coming in. I'll keep scrolling here. The first one has to do. She mentioned that back in the day, Collector was able to provide, like the location tracking without the tracker license.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there was also some capabilities within the Workforce app that allowed for tracking as well. And so it says, will that ability still be included without having to purchase the tracker license? And I don't think so.
It's actually changing. So
Go ahead.
I don't remember. I don't know the time
you're right.
frame.
Right, you're right.
I don't know what the time frame is, but it's sometime very soon that the tracker license will just be included as part of the field worker role, I believe.
Right. So then what that's right. I did hear that. So Kara, the question with that tracker piece, if you're using field worker user types, it will be included. What they weren't included with, which I don't know if that's if that's going to change at all or not, was if you're using like a creator role, which a lot of people have creator user types and they're doing field collection with that role, it did not include that tracker license. But for the field worker user type, it was going to include the tracker license. And I don't think it was going to be included with the creator, which, if that's going to cause a problem for you, please let us know, and we'll definitely share that back with the team.
Yep.
Another issue question from Jeff, which actually says, one issue he's having with collectors when field crews accidentally move predefined point locations during attribute editing. Has this been resolved in field map? For example, locking feature class locations with the ability to edit attributes. So
that can be.
Yeah, because isn't there the option where you can say that users on a feature layer, you can go to the settings for it and say, hey, users can only edit the attributes and not move the feature. So Chris is bringing that up right now, and he can say right there's an option where it's updating attributes and geometry. You can say update attributes only. And then you shouldn't be accidentally moving features. I hope that answers your question, Jeff. Wilma's asking, when you take a picture, is it possible to embed information, for example, the value from a specific attribute or information about date, direction the photo is taken in within field maps? I'm assuming you're asking about, and the answer with that is not, as far as I'm aware of. Like within Survey 123, there's some capability to stamp the photo with like latitude and longitude and other attributes right into the photo. But I don't think the Field Maps application has that capability at this point in time.
I don't know if Field Maps does. I know that in Quick Capture, which we'll get to that in a little bit, that was something that was coming, and because this was a question that came up last summer, actually on this project that I was demoing, and it was coming, but I don't know when, because they were grabbing information from the device and storing it with the image because sometimes they want to and add it to the EXIF data. So I do know that a lot of that information is being captured in Quick Capture in there. I'm not sure about some of the other apps, but that's something that we can look at. So.
Okay, and I think that's about it. I think Kara was mentioning that's odd about the creator level, so we can chat about that after this.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions before we head on? You were done, right, Chris?
Yeah, I think I was done with that piece. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure that there wasn't something that I maybe missed covering.
Yep.
There's a lot there.
Yep. Okay, let's see. Okay, so in the Field Maps application, as regards to user types and licensing, if you have field worker, creator, or GIS pro named user, you can, Field Maps, you can perform, data editing workflows like create and update asset inventories, add photos, that sort of stuff. If you have a viewer, you can view your offline maps, you can create markup, you can view offline and online maps, take some data out in the field, like maybe people just want to have all the information with them when they go out in the field. A viewer can access that. You can actually do it without even being a viewer level user. There's a way that you can create mobile map packages with the publisher extension in Pro, and then they can be anybody who has the Field Maps application without even signing in can view that map package that's been shared to everyone. So one of the cases that we've worked with people on is like trail maps for the public, right? And so maybe you want to take, you're a agency that has trails and you want to share that out with the public. And they're not going to obviously have a login to ArcGIS Online or anything like that. So you can create a mobile map package with the publisher extension in Pro, and you can say allow anonymous access, and then people can use that offline, and they don't even need a viewer named user.
The mobile map package that I showed in the demo is one of those. So that was something like when I was in Fish and Wildlife that with the publisher extension, so people would have all the game management rules in there. So that was an example of how we're
right
there.
And I created one for the Middle Fork of the Salmon River last year for floating, and I'm going to have to create one for the Maine this year for me. So, and I shared it with friends that I was rafting with. So, the tracker application, the premium app license, this is the thing that we were talking about that has changed a little bit. If you want to do those tracker pieces, if you have a field worker license, that tracker will be included in that. At this point, I don't think it's included in a creator license, but we'll check the status on that and see if anything's changed with that. You can, some people actually, instead of getting a field worker license, they'll get an editor level license plus basically the field worker app. You can, and it's a little, so if you knew your users were only needing to use the Field Maps application and they wouldn't need to maybe use Survey 123 or Quick Capture, they just need to use one app, it's a little less expensive to do an editor license plus one of these app licenses than it is to get a field worker. So, like if you knew I had 25 Survey 123 people that were going to be going out, it's a little less expensive to do a survey, an editor level user type plus an app license. And so there's just, the bottom line is, if you got questions about what would make sense, please talk to, your account manager from Esri, or reach out to Chris or myself. We're more than happy to talk about some of these things, or get you in touch with somebody that can answer those, what might make sense for you. Like I mentioned, there is this other application called Workforce, and it's all about planning and coordinating field work. So imagine you got somebody that's back in the office, and they're doing some sort of dispatching. Maybe you're managing 5-10 field workers, and you want to, give them their assignments, and be able to track, how things are going. Workforce is a great app to do that. And right now, it's still a separate application, and it's a separate web application and mobile application. And as we move forward, this technology will get migrated into the ArcGIS Field Maps application as well. So it won't be a separate app in the long term. And then I mentioned the navigator piece, that's out there. That also, the turn-by-turn directions will also get rolled into this one application as well. And it supports things like your custom roads, and being able to load your asset inventory on a turn-by-turn directions map, and being able to use, it can even do multi-stop routing. I know Wilma has been doing some work with folks who are doing going to people's houses to do vaccinations, and that navigator tool can actually send 10 stops to it and tell it to give me the optimum route for visiting those 10 stops within the application. So there's quite a bit that it can do. It's really about improving efficiency and getting more stops in a day. And if that's something that's important for you, then it might be something to start taking a look at. So kind of wrapping up the field maps piece, it's a single map that is easier to deploy and learn. Single sign-on experience, smaller footprint. We're not installing multiple applications. Consistency in how projects get deployed. Hopefully one web application to kind of configure the application, and then choose what you need, and then deploy it to that one application, and then reduce the amount of duplicated data that needs to get loaded on the device especially for those offline workflows.
I did want to mention something with that too, Scott, is that one thing that's super important with that, if you're doing any sort of if IT is doing any sort of mobile device management, and you guys have to use something like AirWatch or Mobile Iron or something like that, one of the things that's really nice is that obviously it's one app that only has to get deployed through that mobile device management software. But, it does also work with the mobile device management like VPNs. And so if you've got something like AirWatch and you've got an ArcGIS Enterprise that's behind your firewall, like having mobile device management applications on your iPhone or something like that would allow you to use something like Field Maps and have that synchronized back with your ArcGIS Enterprise. So there's just some advantages having that sort of single app, and that's something that your IT can, it's just one less thing that they have to manage and keep up to date within those environments as well. So,
thanks, Chris. All right, so we're going to transition over and talk a little bit about some of these other applications like Quick Capture, and here we go. All right. So Quick Capture is this application you may or have not heard of. I know a lot of people have heard about Survey 123 and Collector. This tends to be the one that was released more recently, so there tends to be less knowledge about it, its existence. And really, one way that we look at it is it's called a big button app. So imagine you just, have a very simple interface like you see here. Being able to just tap on, like in this case, it's these observed hazards. What type of hazard? You just tap that button. And it's even got that camera icon in the upper left that tells you that not only will it capture the location and that observed hazard, the type of that observed hazard, it'll also trigger the camera to fire and take a picture, all in one quick shot. And so really, think about it like when you're doing something and you need to capture a lot of things very quickly, a lot of observations quickly. This is a great way of going about it. It's not going to be where you do very detailed form based data entry. But it could be a quick way to capture some stuff, and then you get back, and then maybe there is more work on the back end to, other information that you're going to capture or add to the data in the future. But there's lots of good possibilities for use of this app that we've seen in terms of, like, it could be departments of transportation doing a windshield type survey, or damage assessments, or counting animals from like a helicopter. I mean, there's kind of, the sky's the limit in terms of this application for doing those quick capturing workflows. And you can see it's supported on Apple and Google and even Windows laptop devices as well. So, what are some of the benefits? It works online, offline, kind of like our other applications. Very simple, right? So that would be that you can quickly give it to somebody and get them out in the field, and it might be really low barrier of entry. I also find personally that Survey 123 seems to be a very simple application for people to pick up as well. So I think Quick Capture and Survey 123 of the three apps are probably the easiest for just somebody who's never done this sort of work before to pick it up and start working with, because they might not be familiar with the whole kind of map-centric approach of doing data entry, but all of us GIS folks, of course, have been doing, heads-up digitizing or whatever for years, and it's very makes perfect sense to us. But for other folks, the idea of Quick Capture, just hitting a button, or Survey 123, those tend to be really, really quick to pick up. And obviously the goal of all these applications, I think, is to increase efficiency. And in this case, it's about, I've got a lot of things to capture and I can do it quickly. So how does this stuff, look out there? I mean, it's just another application that ties into your ArcGIS enterprise or online. So that Quick Capture could be, you could be Survey 123, or it could be field maps. And they all have a very similar pattern now, where you've got a mobile application that gets used, and then you've got some sort of designer application to design either the Survey 123 form, or in this case, Quick Capture Designer, or the field maps application that we saw. So we're really seeing this paradigm of having a designer application to build these, design these projects in the web, and then deploy them out to the mobile device. And then, of course, all the other ancillary applications, whether it be ArcGIS Pro to do, analysis of the data, or dashboards to monitor the information coming in real time. So in the Quick Capture Designer, Chris is going to show this in a minute. You can very quickly configure your own big button application right from your web browser. It doesn't require, you're not writing any code or anything like that. This is just a web experience to author your Quick Capture project. There's variables, device variables, so things like, I want to, also, while you're capturing something, like in this case a bridge, you want to maybe grab the horizontal accuracy of the GPS, you want to grab the direction of travel. Those are all things that could automatically be grabbed. The user doesn't have to type in that stuff. So that's this notion of the device variable, what time you captured this. So there's a number of variables in there. Chris is going to show a little bit of this as well. So those are very often, you think, only thing I can capture is that there's a bridge at this location. Well, actually, there's lots of other things that can quickly be brought in as well. You can also ask for user input. And so it could be that when a button gets pushed, that you ask them for something. Obviously, anytime you do that, that's going to potentially slow down your data capture. It could be a text box like you're seeing there. It could be a pick list. There could be like, I want to pick, one of three options. Those are options as well. Or you can actually update some attributes based on project starting. And I think Chris has an example of showing that as well. And these things can be required. You have to fill out the name, or it could be an optional thing. And there's some data validation rules that you can put in there as well. So Anyway, Chris has a great demo of that here in a second. Now there's also, I think one of the really interesting things that does set this application apart for some other applications is it supports capturing multiple observations at the same time, right? And you can see in the kind of the animation on the screen that we're capturing these sidewalks, and when you start capturing, like in this case, a bike path on the right side, it's flashing, and as you move, it's just going to keep drawing that line. But in the meantime, they're also capturing that there's a sidewalk on the right side, and then there's a sidewalk on the left side. So imagine you're drawing basically up to, in this case, up to 3 lines at the same time, and then there might be a point or an issue that you notice along the way. This is a point location, maybe it's a pothole or an issue with the sidewalk. You could tap that and collect that. So being able to, basically drawing multiple lines and capturing some points all at the same time, that's kind of a unique feature of this particular application. I see it a lot in like Department of Transportation type workflows, but I'm sure there's many others that make sense as well. You can group buttons to capture information kind of in this mutually exclusive manner. So like it can't be, it's got to be either trails paved or trails not paved, right? It's got to be one or the other, or pavement condition good versus bad. There's the grouping of these things to keep them separate and keep your data clean, basically. So Chris, are you ready to show some quick capture? I can't hear you if you are there.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. Talking to myself.
Kara asked a question about the directional. She said, is it based on tracking points in a line, or is it through the compass?
It's through the compass.
I think so too, but we can check. I'll look in that while you're doing your demo, Chris.
Want to go ahead and stop sharing?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem. Make sure. Oops, that's not the right screen. Let's try this again. So much like field maps, there's an option for quick capture here in the app launcher. So you can just click on that, and then you can basically come to this screen where you've got what projects you might have, or creating a new project. I'm actually going to start with an existing one, so you can kind of sort of see what one might look like. So this one was done for a salmon escapement observations up in Alaska. And so in this case, we're going to capture tracks. We're going to capture a line, basically where they're flying. And then we had, different species of salmon, and they wanted, a live user input, which allowed them to type in a number. So in this case, if I click this, it's going to be like, hey, how many did you see? Or, we had these sort of generic numbers to say, hey, yep, we think there's an estimate of 50, and what type is it? Is it a red? Is it a carcass? Or is it, a live fish? And so when you come in here, you can click on one of these, and again, we've got the appearance. This is the size and shape that they showed kind of in the, the little animations that Scott was doing those. But you can also add images. So if you wanted pictures of the object, and again, this is another one of those things that if you're going to send some people out into the field, and maybe they're not familiar with everything, you can have pictures of what those things are. So you can be like, hey, if you see one of these, capture that. So you have these different buttons. And on the data side, then you get your direction of travel. And so when you start looking at this, you can use the devices, Azimut, which I believe that's the compass piece, or you can use the GPS for, different things. So there's a lot of different options here. And again, speed, your photo, you can see there's all these different options. So you're able to like pick out, different information in here. Now, when we get down to our actual fields, this is where I'm setting it up. So because I grouped this with Chinook, I want the species to be Chinook when it gets saved. And then because my button is live, the status is going to be live. And so I'm predefining, some of these things. And then I have what's called a project user input. And so what this was a project area. So what they wanted was a field in my data that's going to say like what project or area is this that we're working or doing the survey in. So I created this project user type, and then when I'm in the data itself, I can say, hey, on that field, I want you to use that project user input. So whatever gets entered in there, automatically just enter that in here. And again, the number observed. In this case, because it's a live user input, it's saying, I ask, what's the question? So I can create new questions, but it's just like, please enter the number of fish, and it's a number, and that gets set up. On the other ones, we can see that I'm just setting, hey, the number is 50 because that's what I've defined it as. So you're creating these buttons and setting that up. And so, how that works is if I create a new project, I can start from an existing layer. And let's just say I'll do this. Because we did it with field maps, I'll do it again on this one. But I'm just going to grab this information here, and it's going to create, I can say, hey, create the buttons from layer symbology. Since I already have the data symbolized, like, can I create buttons that way? Hit next, give it a name, where I want to store it. And once it starts building that project, I don't have access. That's weird. Isn't this me? Oh, that's fun. Always when you're doing demos, does that happen? Let's try with a different layer. Let's do this one. So you can see here it created the buttons for me based on my colors, and it created my line layer because that's all that's in that data set. And then this is where I can go in and say I want project level input. So I'd be like, what's my project area? And this is how I just start typing this information in. I want it to be a single line of text, or I can make it a choice list. Scott mentioned, and so then you'd be able to pick from a pick list of different areas. So maybe you're doing a project and it's within a specific region. You might want to say, hey, I'm in region 3 right now, and I want that to be stored with my data. You can just come in here and add that information in, and you can say, hey, this is region 1, this is region 2, this is region 3. I can do batch edit, which then lets me, this is much like you might see in server 1, 2, 3, these same, and then, or I could say, just let someone type. And I can also make this required. So I have these different options. Be like, hey, you have to pick these. And then in my map, I can configure like which base map would I would like to see in there. I can change that to something else and say I really would like to have, imagery. And then if I can, I would like to do the buttons in the map side by side. And this is if you have a tablet and you really want to see the map that, with that, you can, do this display on tablet landscape, and it'll put the map next to it if you're using, like I said, tablet. I can see what that would look like by going in here and then saying, hey, let's rotate this. And it's just showing like this is what your screen might look like. So you're able to look at all of these and sort of see, this is what it's going to look like on an 11-inch iPad. There's some other things where I can set my recommended accuracy. So if I want the data to be, hey, it needs to be within like 5 meters or whatever else, I can say this is the recommended. And then I can also do a set required and say it has to be at least this good. And then on the distance threshold, this really has to do with like, if I'm doing a line work, like how far does it have to go before it connects the the next line or the next vertex in that. And then how big of the photos do I want to send back? To Scott's point, when we talked about attachments earlier, if I was doing that, like, to reduce file size, I can, make these smaller if I want. Or I could not resize them and keep them, the original size. A lot of times these devices have, 12 megapixel cameras on them, so the photos can get pretty large.
I think one thing that I think is really interesting about using quick capture on a tablet is just being able to have this map on there. So when you're on the like a mobile device like an iPhone, you don't get that map capability like that, right?
Right, correct. It only works on a tablet.
Right, and so a lot of people are using this on a tablet because they want to be able to see some of the other data capturing that they've done already. And it's just really, I think that's really really useful for a lot of folks.
Right. So if I needed to, work on this where I had, the live and, different types, I can basically duplicate that button and then I can move them around and I can, change the name of it. So maybe in this case it'd be, live Chinook. And then in my data, I just go down, all that stuff's already set for me, and I just say, hey, this one's live. So I'm able to, and then I can say, use the project user input for my project area, that kind of stuff. Once I save it, then that's available for me to download. So we'll take a look at what it looks like when you actually are using this on the device. And so here's what it would look like if you were like on a tablet. So I can start capturing my track. I can put in my index area. So in this case, this might be like, 101x or something. And basically now every record will have 100x in there. I can start doing capture track. Now we should be able to hear this because it does have an audible response when you click the buttons.
Start capture track.
So hopefully you guys could hear it says start capture track. And then if I go and find, a Chinook live and 50.
Live minus 50.
You can hear it read those out. And if I do an user input, you can see how many fish were observed. I might just say there's 25.
Live user input.
It just tells me that I did that live user input. You can see there's these records on the device and things like that. It's saying, hey, your GPS accuracy is not that great. This is what is recommended. So there's, some of these warnings. And because I'm online, it was automatically sending those records for me. And I can go grab, different, fish.
Sockeye. Live. User input.
And you can see that, it's very simple, very quickly, easy to use, but it's still capturing sort of that track that's still blinking. Now when I'm done, if I wanted to, I could put a comment, work is done, and
end capture track.
And it's, has all this information. To Scott's point about having the dashboards, one of the things that I've built for this particular project, let me refresh it because there's probably some data in here. Now what we should see, hopefully, is that there should be a project called 100x, maybe. This is the same data set. Or no, sorry, this is the wrong one. Let me go back to this and grab the tide. This one. So I just want you to see how this works. Let's do 100. There I am. Hooray.
Water level station electronics box.
Let this one send. Now back in my dashboard here that I've set up for this particular project, I should see a project called 100. And then I can see the details of this project, and there I was, doing this demo here. So, one thing that was really nice is that you can set up, dashboards to go look at the content that you have, in these. And you can see I've had fun demoing, this with different fun photos and stuff like that. But you can look at, different phases. So which ones were in the install phase or which ones were in the site recon phase. So I have this dashboard that's connected to my quick capture project that then shows me, what all these different things are. And so that's where you can sort of combine a couple of these as you're building these out. So I think that's all I've got for on the builder side. So back to you, Scott, or any questions I'd be happy to answer.
I guess it helps if I unmute. I just mentioned that there's a couple of different directions that you can get. There's the azimuth, which does use the compass bearing, and then there's a direction of travel, which does require that you be moving, right?
Yep.
So there are a couple of ways to get that within Quick Capture. Kara's also asking me in terms of is that the same with all the applications? And I would have to look. I don't know. I think our Survey 123 is going to use the direction using the compass, I would think. I don't think you need to be moving for that. I don't know about field maps.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Let's see. Let me share my screen. All right, so let's shift gears and kind of jump over into Survey 123. We talked about which app do we choose. We've got our geocentric, we've got our big button, and we've got now a more form-centric application, very robust forms and lots of great logic that we can put in them with Survey 123. So the Survey 123 workflow is, essentially very similar to the others in the sense that you're going to use a designer to design your survey, and then you're going to share it out there and to whoever's going to be filling out that survey, and you're going to get your data collection piece, and then you're going to analyze results. I think one of the big differences between Survey 123 and the others is Survey 123 is being used for a lot of public-facing stuff. So very simple surveys for the public. So your user base might be a lot bigger for Survey 123. Potentially could be a lot bigger for Survey 123 surveys, just because it's very common for people to, agencies to put out a Survey 123 survey, and it's just a public, hey, we need to gather information from the public, and you can share those anonymous surveys with Survey, with Survey 123. People don't have to log in as a field worker or something like that to use it. The components kind of are, you create surveys in one of two ways. We use Survey 123 Connect, which is a desktop application. If you're going to design it using what we call the XLS form, it's actually not Esri calling it the XLS form. The XLS form is a open specification for designing forms, and so that's what we started with when we built Survey 123. And then of course people said, well, it's great, but we also want a very simple web designer. And so we've created this web designer that allows us to build surveys as well. And then the people that are doing the data collection could be using a web application, or they could use a field application. And one of the big benefits with the field application, of course, is that you could potentially be filling out Survey 123 surveys offline when you're disconnected out in the field, whereas the web application is going to be a workflow that is for online purposes. And then we have the Survey 123 website that allows you to analyze the results of your surveys, and export the data or generate report, that sort of stuff within that website. So, unlike some of the other smart form solutions out in the market, Survey 123 forms are location aware. If you haven't looked at Survey 123 for a while, one of the questions that we got early on was like, well, this is great. We want to use it to capture a location. Yeah, it worked great for points, but then it didn't work with lines or polygons. Those things have all been, those are all capabilities that have been added. People can now draw an area or draw a line or a point using Survey 123. So, lots of different options for location, and it just is constantly growing in the capabilities of the Survey 123 application. They can be, these smart forms can be used all over to collect, whether it's research data, do inspections, damage assessments, all over the board. So, I mean, obviously there's crossover in some of these things, right? You could potentially use field apps for inspections. It just really, to me, it kind of depends on the complexity of the form and who's filling it out. The most complex forms, those are going to be best served by something like Survey 123. So let's talk about a little bit about how what we're doing here. I mean, really the idea is that we want to make the data capture process, no matter what application we're using, as efficient as possible. We want the data that's collected in the field to be back in the office in real time as much as possible. We really want to reduce errors. I mean, there's some great logic that we can build into Survey 123 forms so that we get high quality data and we're not having to clean stuff up after the fact. That's on the survey designer to design a good survey that has that logic built in that doesn't allow people to put in bad or questionable data. And then we want to maybe pre-populate responses. Like a lot of times people want to have some information about the whatever work that they're doing pre-populated, so they don't have to enter that in every time. And we really want to walk who's responding to the survey through that form. So how do we create a survey? And the easiest way to start is with the Survey 123 web designer. It's a simple browser-based application, drag and drop visual form builder where you can quickly pick, I want a text box or I want a drop-down list. It's the easiest way if you've never done Survey 123 to get started. Just go to the survey123.arcgis.com and start, building and log in, start building your survey. That is basically step one when I work with people who are getting started with Survey 123. But often, not every capability that's in the Survey 123 is available in the web designer. And so people will get so far and they might be like, okay, well, actually, there's some stuff that I want to do that's not available in the web designer. And then that's where we start thinking about using the Survey 123 Connect in the XLS form. But the beauty is you can actually author something in the web designer and then basically, say, actually, I want to download that into Survey 123 Connect and not restart from scratch. You can bring in what you've designed in the web and start that process in Survey 123 Connect. So that's the other application. This is an application that you in Survey 123 Connect, an application that you install on your machine. You use it in conjunction with Microsoft Excel. You kind of define the content, look, and behavior of the smart form, right through this application and data that you're loading into the schema of the survey within this XLS form. And it gives you basically everything we can possibly do within Survey 123 within that environment. So Chris, are you going to jump into showing them how to create a Survey 123 survey using the web?
Yep. So okay. So this is survey123.arcgis.com, and I'm logged in, and I've got some surveys here, so you can see the ones I have. But if I wanted to create a new one, basically it says, how do you want to do this? And this is something new too, that's very recent, is that there's actually some templates out there. So I'll kind of look at both of these real quick. So the first one I'm going to do is we'll do the blank one, and then we'll give it, and so this would be kind of a demo. And of course, we've got to have tags. You have tags for everything. And like Scott mentioned, this is an easy way to come in here because it's drag and drop. There is some form logic that you can do. So I could, take something like let's just say a drop down, for instance. It might be my first question. And in here on my right-hand side, I've got my different choices. And I can do my batch edit if I wanted to. So we're just going to do something simple, because it's a demo, so I'm just going to put in some letters here. And then I might throw in another question that might be, some text. And what's nice is that I can say on this question, kind of sort of if A is selected, answer this question. And what I can do is over here, I've got some rules, and I can say if A is selected, then go to question 2. If B is selected, I can go to something else, right? And so there's some ways for me to do some form logic in here. There's some really nice, options for like these likers. So you can be like, here's a, a way that someone can sort of, here's a question like, how did this go? I agree or, or disagree with those things. And again, you can change those. How many is there? So in this case, we can go 3 or 7, and it sort of, puts those in for you automatically. Or you can say, hey, there's up to 10 different things, right? Or maybe there's just 2. Maybe it's kind of a yes/no question, something like that. You have the options to make these things required. And then, again, you can do, ratings questions. It can be stars or hearts or, a little thumbs up. How many of those is theirs? And that kind of thing. A lot of different types of questions in here. There's time. You can do signatures, which is really nice. So if you want someone to be able to sign it, you can have a signature question. You need people to upload like a document of some type, so you can choose what they are. So you can say, hey, I want this to be upload a zip file or upload different documents. So what type of documents do you support? Okay, I just want, PDFs. That's all I want. And, I can say that there's, 2 of these, right? Or 3 of these required. Or I can say, there needs to be at least 1, but you can put, a maximum of 4. So you have these different options for, these different file types and things like that. So pretty easy to build one of these. And when you're all said and done, you can preview it to test how it works, which is nice. Because now I can come in here and see like, well, what's it going to look like on the web? Okay, well now if you can see question 2 is missing. So if I hit A, question 2 shows up. If I go back to question B, it disappears. So you can see there's my logic is working. And if I want to, I can sign it. And of course I can upload files if I needed to. I can see what it's going to look like on a mobile device or on a tablet. So it gives me some concept of, what this is going to look like. And then when I'm all good to go, I can just publish this, and it's going to create a feature layer and some other options and those types of things behind the scenes. So this is, one that's actually I did for some for a health agency in Oregon, and here I've got a site ID, so they want to know where it is and what the site type is, and then of course a map of where something is, and then I've got some options when I do my map to say, is it a point, is it a line, or is it an area? So I've got different options there. And this one's already been published, so I can't change it, but I can add in another one if I needed to. And then, we've got the drop-down boxes, and then you have these other types of questions, where I can do these creative questions to help me out with that. And this one happened to have a signature. And once you go and actually collect data, it's kind of nice because I can go look at that information. So this whole web environment gives me not only the ability to design my survey, but once it gets published, I can choose how it gets shared. So is it out to everyone, or is it with specific groups, and who can actually see the results of the survey? So this would be who can submit data, who can look at the data, and then who might be able to update this. So who else on my team could help me manage this? So there's some really nice options in here as far as that goes. There's some options to, sort of just look at some of my questions. So I can do word clouds, and, it's giving me some sort of responses. Now, again, there's not tons of data in here, but there is just some really nice, ways for you to take a look at some of this data as it is, and I can filter, by date ranges and things like that. And then I'm able to actually go look at the data as well. If I really wanted to make an edit to one of these, I could, change some of this information right here. So there's a nice interface for me to modify content if I need to. So there's loaded it back into my form. Maybe I need to move the map, or maybe this was supposed to say no, that kind of stuff. And then I can, submit that change. Now that submission has been updated. And then I have this ability to generate reports. So I can take this record. I don't have any templates in this one yet, but I could create a report template and build reports and push all that stuff out and or export the data to a number of different formats. So this web browser has a lot of pieces in here. I can also look at how many people have submitted and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, we won't get into it too much on the reports piece, but I do think that the reports are a very useful piece that a lot of people tend to get into. And the thing that's nice about it is you can design your report using, it's basically just a Word doc, template, and substitute in values and put things like your logos and all that sort of stuff. I guess Chris will maybe create a sample template or something.
Yep. So it'll create a template for me here, and then I want to edit that. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to download the template. And then it gives me a Word doc, and in this Word doc is like all my fields. And so this is where I can, this sort of $ and squiggly bracket with some different values here.
Those are different field names.
Those are different field names in my database. And so I can rearrange these however I want. This is where I've got the ability to start, if I wanted to insert my own logos and I wanted to, put some of the stuff maybe more into a table format or a grid format, like I can, make this look however I want. And then once I'm done with that, I go here and hit edit, and I just, select the new file for that report, and it gets uploaded here. And then when you go to generate a report, you're able to
pick which template. And you can have multiple templates, yeah.
Yep.
And you can then generate a PDF or have it be a Word, the output format there, I think, is a Word doc or PDF. So a lot of people are using that capability. In fact, I think Wilma did quite a bit of that with some stuff at IDWR when she was over there. So you got some good resources in Idaho, folks I know that are already using that capability. But reporting is one of those capabilities that we always get questions about, and I find that this environment within Survey 123 is actually probably one of our stronger reporting tools that we have out there.
So now my report is generated, and you can see, there's the report. Again, I didn't make anything fun, but you can see my signature, you can see the map, you can, all the data that was in there. You can see that. So were we going to do the connect yet, or are we?
No, I'm gonna bounce back and.
All right. Nope. Cool. All right. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. So.
All right. So I got about 20 minutes left. So when you create your survey, whether it be in online or through Connect, you can have private surveys that you share with a well-known group of users. Your secured access. You can, anybody that is going to edit that is going to need an ArcGIS account, for each of those users. You can leverage editor tracking, so whoever's logged in can automatically get their submissions stamped. And this is really good for maybe sensitive data or for tracking survey submissions and edits as people your users make changes to it. But you can also use public surveys, and these are surveys that you share with everyone. AKA anybody that's especially when it's in ArcGIS Online, it's public to the whole, could be potentially public to the whole world. They don't need to have an ArcGIS account. Anyone can submit. It's maybe good for crowdsourcing. The other option that you have is if you don't like that, a lot of people are using Survey 123 with Hub, our Hub Premium product, and that allows you to, if it's not agency users, maybe you're working on some project and you're working with other, maybe it's like you're working with public groups like a conservation group or something like that, and you want them to be able to submit data securely. They could do that using a product that we have called ArcGIS Hub Premium, and you actually get like a bucket of users that are called community users, and they can get a login, and they can securely submit data to you, using Survey 123. And so they're much lower cost than like a field worker user or a creator level user. And so but it might be scientists or something like that you're working with that need to securely share data. So I see a lot of people using these Survey 123 surveys, engaging in a constituency in a secure manner using Survey 123 and Hub Premium. So that's just a thought. There's kind of like, private surveys that you do within, your own organization, but maybe you want to do kind of a private survey with public stakeholders that have a sign-in. And then there's the wide open public surveys. And so, Chris showed the web-based designer, but there's, like I said, there's often cases where, you can't do everything that you want to do in the web designer. And so being able to do, different sorts of layouts and multi-language surveys and certain calculations, there's a number of things in there that you just can't configure at this point through the web form. Although I will say that the web form keeps adding more and more capability, getting closer to parity, but it's just not there at this point in time. And so that's when, most people that become Survey 123 configurers end up in the XLS form using Survey 123 Connect and this Excel form to configure their surveys. And then, of course, having the Survey 123 application, on the device, you have this inbox. You can use the map and a list to explore existing data. You can kind of, create a to-do list and, have assignments within the Survey 123 app and be able to navigate to those assignments. And so, some of the new capabilities is being able to create, copy a record from the inbox and, indicators to how far away things are, other surveys are that you, have already mapped. So this is just a capability that you have within the app, this inbox, that you don't really have within the web application as well. And then the other thing, and this is actually available for both web-based surveys and the surveys that you fill out through the device, but there's a technology called webhooks out there, and they allow you to integrate with other business systems. So one of the questions that we often get is, as soon as a survey gets submitted, we want to notify somebody that, hey, there's something that's come in. We need to send them an email and let them know that they need to do something with it. And so there's many webhook platform providers. Microsoft has one called Power Automate that is tied into their Office 365 product. We often use one called Integromat, and there's one called Zapier. There's others out there, and they're kind of it's a standard for basically building these integrations. You can really do some interesting stuff, and Chris is going to show an example of that sort of reporting from a Survey 123 application and doing some sort of notification with webhooks, and you can talk a little bit about the webhooks. So we'll go with that. You ready, Chris?
Yes, I am. I'm going to show a couple of things here. I think on the slide it said roadkill, but I'm actually going to change to something else because we've talked about a lot of things here in this whole concept of hub. So one of the things that I'm going to show real quick is the Survey 123 Connect. And so, this is when you open it, this is what it looks like. Again, you can create surveys. What's really nice is you can, bring like a survey from existing data sets. So I can pull from templates, I can pull from samples, I can pull from my own surveys I already have, or I can say, hey, I want to pull this from a feature service, and it'll basically take all the information from a feature service and start doing things for me. I'm not going to create one now, but I wanted to show how this works. But in this case, again, another salmon survey. I got some weather information that I've built in here, what my species are. What's really cool about this particular one is that I've got some logic in here so that as I, add fish counts, I get a full survey summary down here. So this is what we call a repeat. This is something you can only do in the connect with the XLS form. So I can, come in and say, hey, this is what I found at this particular location. Now I want to go to a new location. I'm going to start over. And as I go and add these, it continues to keep, sort of a tab for me as far as everything that I've collected and how many locations that I've surveyed. So now I've, surveyed 2 locations, and this is my totals. So those are some things that you can do within the XLS form. And, this is sort of what it looks like when you start building it. So you've got your, sort of the type of question. So some of these are notes, or you can see some groupings. I can set up my repeats for my repeat questions, and I can see my geometry is inside of my repeat. So I'm going to have many points associated with this. So each one of those observations gets its own latitude and longitude. I can set up what the appearance looks like and those types of things, but I can also set up, calculations. And so in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want to count the live, questions, or, summarize those as we go along. And that's sort of where this goes. It's saying, hey, summarize all of these values in the tables and things like that. And then we can set up, some other information. There's choice lists. So you can create choice for their pick lists, their settings, which this one doesn't have a lot in it. But if I wanted it to be like a grid style, or I wanted all this to go to a specific feature service, I could set up where I want this to submit to. So within this form, and as I make changes to this, let's say I added a question, for instance, here's my new question. And when I hit save, when I go back to my form, it automatically detects that, hey, there was a change to this form. And so it's going to convert whatever is in here. And if you have errors and things like that, it'll tell you, where you've made mistakes. But now when I go to the bottom of this, I've got this option where I see my new question. I've got options in here to set up my map and all those other things, which map I'm going to use, where is it going to be zoomed into, how far down, that kind of stuff. So this is where you can define if you're going to use the inbox folder and some of those other things that that Scott talked about. And then you can publish that survey from there, and again, you can manage it from this. As we look at something called, I'm going to do something that we had set up as a hub site, right? So this is a snowmobile trail thing that Scott and I created. And, this is sort of, if I log in and I'm not a part of the community, I don't have an identity, one of those community users, there's only so much I can do. So I can, look at, places to go, so a map that I can interact with and, see information. There's this option for me to follow, so this is where I could, join in with a community account. But one of the things that I can do is I can report a hazard if I was actually on a snowmobile trail and maybe there was an avalanche or something like that. And this works on the web and it also works on the mobile device. But I could say, hey, there's an avalanche, and hate when it does that during demo time. But I could say, hey, I'm on this trail down here. And when I submit that, there's a webhook tied to this where an email should come through. So hopefully my email came through, and you guys can see a trail hazard of type avalanche has been reported in the Buck Mountain area. So I have a webhook set up that tells me, it notifies me. Now, if I did this in a different location, Scott would have been notified. So I have a polygon that defines an area of responsibility for that. One of the things I want to mention is that if I sign in and I have an account, I have more options. So I can look at a dashboard. There is a, where did my dashboard go? There we go. So there's a dashboard of information. So by joining this community, I'm able to see this dashboard. I've got other ways to submit information. So I could, if I've got a snowmobile club, or if I want to download mobile trail maps, I get access to that. Or if someone was doing snowmobile grooming, we could do a quick capture snowmobile grooming app that's basically telling you like when you're grooming these different things. So you have this hub rolls everything all in together. By being a member and having a community account allows me to do more things, but I can also get to some of these surveys that have access to that. Now, if we go back to the actual webhook, this is Integromat. And so I've got it set up to watch a survey. So basically, as something is being submitted, as a record comes in, it's going to call a map service, which is my area of responsibility map service. And it's going to use the point and say, hey, do an intersect, find out, and query whose area of responsibility that is. And then it takes that and parses it, and then we build it into an email. And then that, we use all of the information from a lot of these different pieces to define who's going to be the contact, what's their email address, what's the information about the area, and what type of hazard was being reported, and we build all that out. So this is sort of how a webhook works. It's tied specifically to that survey. And you can do things like reporting. I've got some other surveys where I run reports. So I think this one, after something's been submitted, I can ask questions about, I can filter it and do different things. So in some cases I might say, hey, if this value equals something like yes, and this one equals yes, then I want this to send an email to this person. If this one equals yes, and this one says needs review, then it needs to go back to this one. And if this one says, hey, this is yes, yes, and yes on all three, then I want you to build the report. I want to go get that report, and then I want to attach it to an email and send it to somebody. And so you can set up these very, complex webhooks that allow you to sort of have workflows that define that out. And one of the things that I'm doing in these emails is I'm also providing a link to a survey to go edit some, so in this case, it's a review. Like you need to go and approve some things. So it opens up the survey, passes in some information for it, and then it loads that record, and then they're able to make changes and submit that for review, which then comes back in here and furthers the process. So there's ways that you can create really nice workflows using webhooks. Let's see, Oh, and then the one thing I did want to show, there's actually a question about app integration, and so I did want to show that here. One of the things that you can do is if you're using, something like field maps or collector, you can say, hey, I want to inspect this application. And what it's going to do in this case is it's passing information through. So it says, hey, this is a culvert, or in this case, an end treatment. I passed in the ID for that, and I know that this is an outlet. And then I can say, hey, this is in good condition, and maybe take some photos and then submit that. So there's ways for you to create URL links and pass that information back and through. And I know this probably isn't the greatest But, we set up a URL. This is the survey. This 412's number is the survey. And then this is where I'm saying, hey, here's this field. This is this, information. Here's this other field. This is the culvert object type. And then, here's this other field. Is it an inlet or an outlet?
So often we get, people who they might use the field apps and be out in the field to look at like a map of all their stuff, and then they want to tap on a culvert and say, actually, I want to, go ahead and tap on that. I want to do an inspection, or I want to do something else, and maybe, or report damage or something like that. Those can launch different survey 1, 2, 3 surveys altogether. So this is just a nice way to kind of wrap up this discussion today, is that, we can still integrate, these applications together, like have survey 1, 2, 3 be called from field maps or be called from a web application, and pre-populate some of the values in the survey with data that you already have on the feature. So if you haven't looked at integrating those apps, that's definitely there's a lot of information out there, like on the GeoNet and within the help documentation on how to set up these things. But a lot of it's just about configuring a pop-up within survey 1, 2, 3, or excuse me, within the web map that can be then used in field maps and whatnot.
So like here's an example where I set up, hey, I'm at a site, this polygon, but I'm going to do, a well information or, disinfection treatment or deficiency summary or an inventory and narrative, like I've got all these different surveys.
They're all different forms, yeah.
And, one of these is going to, open up a specific survey. So in this case, I did a disinfection, survey. And you can see it, brought in. In this case, I'm pushing, I don't need my GPS. I want the actual, information from here. And then, I can do another one of these. Whoops. URL. I got way too much stuff open. But I think treatment is one of the other ones that I had. So, yeah.
So, I mean, lots of things to think about. I really wanted you to see the webhooks piece, because I think there's a huge amount of upside and great, really cool stuff we can do within the webhooks environment. And just know that we can also integrate, these applications together, whether, be the field maps application with survey 1, 2, 3 is very common to do those sorts of integrations. And they're not like custom development. It's just configuring the web map to do that sort of stuff. So there was a question about, survey 1, 2, 3 going anywhere. Absolutely. It's been growing in use and popularity, and we're doing a lot of work on it. I don't think it's going anywhere. So I kind of still see these 3 applications. I don't see survey 1, 2, 3 quick capture and field maps getting merged together into one application. I still expect that for the foreseeable future that those will be 3 different applications. But we will see Navigator and Workforce integrated into the field maps application.
And for Dan's question about, your collector maps and field maps, like collector will be deprecated in December. And so there'll be no more support essentially at that point after that. But field maps is built off of the collector base code. And so if you open up a collector map in field maps, it's going to work exactly the way it worked in collector. The things you won't have are like if you haven't gone through the web application and set up your forms and messed around with the templates and stuff, like that's just a piece you won't see. You won't have those pieces unless you go in there and do that. But it will work just the same way that it works in collector. And you can open those up and take a look, and it'll be just fine.